Welcome, board members and guests, to the Wednesday, December 6, 2023 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Under public comment, after I open an item for public comment, those joining us by Zoom webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the Raise Hand button located in the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you are joining over the phone, you can press *9. PCTA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comments to Solvi Sable at ssabol@pctpa.net. Thank you so much, everyone. And Amanda, would you lead us in a pledge this morning?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, let's get started here. Roll call, please, Solvi.
Andriotta?
Here.
Broadway?
Here.
Burris?
Here.
Cortez?
Here.
Dowden Calvillo?
I'm present. I'm participating remotely today for just cause. I have a cold.
Okay. Howdeshelt?
Here.
Jones?
Here.
Wilkins?
Present.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to item C then. Agenda review. Matt?
Yes, Madam Chair. The agenda was amended to add the SR 49 cooperative agreement for PS&E and right-of-way on the consent calendar. This was posted in accordance with the Brown Act, and the agreement is available for public review on our website.
Okay, moving on to item D then. AB 2449. Matt?
Madam Chair, as Director Dowden Cavillo indicated, she is participating remotely due to just cause. There is no board action needed, and we can move to the next item.
Okay, great. Item E, approval of the minutes. Everyone have a chance?
Move approval.
A second.
All right, motion and a second. How to show?
Andriotta?
Yes.
Broadway?
Yes.
Burris?
Yes.
Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, item F, public comment. Persons may address the board on items not on this agenda. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Do you have anyone from the public that would like, anyone online?
Yeah, hi, this is Deanne Gillett, General Counsel. Just with the remote participation from the council member, there is a new requirement that the camera is on during the deliberations with the exception. So I just want to remind the Commissioner, Don Calvillo, that the camera needs to be on for her remote participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll turn in just 2 seconds.
Comment?
Heidi, you're free to speak.
Yes, hi, I'm Heidi Temko. Good morning, Chair and board members and staff. I just wanted to comment on the master airport plan that's coming up. I know it's up for an update, and I am requesting that the powers that be, I'm not sure whether that's the PCTPA or the Board of Supervisors or both, or the city, that decide on this issue or discuss the update and are the ones that decide on it. I'm not sure if they're going to include members of the public in a discussion group and in the decision-making process, other than the 3-minute comments and written and letters. So I want to urge PCTPA to include members of the public that are outside the city limit and are affected by the airport noise and safety issues to be actively included in the process. And I also would like to request that the process is more transparent than it has been in the past in terms of notifying all the residents that are in the zone affected by the airport. That's my request, and I appreciate PCTPA taking some action in this direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt, would you like to comment on that?
Good morning. Ms. Temko is referring to the master plan update that the city of Auburn is undertaking with respect to their airport. And that particular planning effort is under the direction of the city of Auburn. We, PCTPA, are a participant on their project development team, as well as, I believe, county staff, Caltrans, and Federal Aviation Administration. I don't believe, they've only had one meeting so far that I've participated in, so I don't know where they are with respect to their public outreach, but it was conveyed to them that they needed a broader public outreach than previous planning efforts. And so hopefully they will take that into account. And we can carry forward Ms. Temko's comment to the airport manager. So.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, all right, any other public comment?
No.
Okay, all right then. We will move on to item G, consent calendar, Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Okay, how do?
Second.
Motion and a second.
Andriotta?
Aye.
Broadway?
Yes.
Burris?
Aye.
Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, all right, moving on to item H, consent calendar for Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency.
Move approval of the consent calendar?
I second.
All right, motion and second.
Andriotta?
Aye.
Broadway?
Yes.
Burris?
Aye.
Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, then, moving on to item I, 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program Adoption. Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Chair and Board. Rick Carter, Deputy Executive Director. So just to kind of cover a little background on the RTIP, this is a document that's used by the state to program STIP funding. This is done every 2 years. STIP funding is a portion of the fuel tax dollars. In terms of STIP dollars, 75% of that is apportioned to all the counties in the state. The other 25%, the balance of that is allocated to the state for interregional projects, which I'll get into a little bit in a couple of slides. The 2024 RTIP, it programs dollars for fiscal years 25 through 29. Because this is done every 2 years, it basically amends the first 3 years worth of funding, and then the last 2 years is basically new funding. In terms of the actual programming that we are looking to fund with the STIP dollars, I think as everyone's aware, PCTPA advanced the Lincoln Bypass project years ago, and that was advanced with STIP dollars. So we have essentially borrowed future funding to pay for the Lincoln Bypass project. We are still paying that off, so we don't have any new STIP funding. We don't have any capacity to do new projects. So we're not programming any new construction projects in the 2024 STIP. We are expected to pay off that advance around 2030. So the next funding, the next STIP round in 2026, we expect to have funding then and be able to program projects. We do, however, get what they call PPM funds. That's planning, programming, and monitoring. And that is funding basically for our operations, kind of staff and overhead costs. So the STIP allocation for that is between $210,000 and $202,000, varies depending on the year. So that is being programmed. And the nice thing is it is an increase over what we've been currently getting. We've been getting about $144,000. So it's a $65,000 annual increase. So that's helpful for our operations budget. One of the requirements of the RTIP is to list out the interregional projects. I mentioned kind of in the first slide, the 25% of the funds that go to the state. So they ask us to list what our needs are. The state programs those funds, so this just sort of goes into, I would say, sort of a wish list for the region that the state kind of looks at and considers. So on the slide is the list of what we have in the RTIP. This is the same list we went over in 2022 and submitted, except for the third bullet. The third bullet we've added this year, and it's a study of managed lanes on Highway 65 between I-80 and Lincoln. We have carpool lanes that have been kind of analyzed and approved just in the southbound direction between Pleasant Grove and I-80. So this would propose that we look at the entire corridor opportunity for potential funding in the future out of the ITIP. So the other thing that the RTIP is required to talk about is intercity rail needs. So here's the two projects shown with that. Again, this is the same list as 2022. It's the third track expansion and feasibility studies for expanded rail to Tahoe, Reno, and Sparks. I will note that most of you are probably familiar that we were part of a high-level study looking at expanded rail up to Tahoe, Reno, and Sparks. That study was completed in the past year. It's a very high-level study. If we're going to expand passenger rail, there needs to be more detailed studies of the stations and kind of track improvements. So that's why that is still listed. The other requirement is they've asked us to list potential, what they call highway to boulevard program projects. These are the sorts of projects that would make state highways more amenable to pedestrian type traffic on routes like Highway 49. So we've listed continuous bike lanes and pedestrian facilities on 49. There is existing facilities. We have an upcoming project that will add to that, but it doesn't add everything in the entire corridor. So we've listed this, the full corridor gets bicycle lanes and pedestrian facilities. And then the last bullet there is bicycle and pedestrian overcrossings at various locations over the state highway. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Board members, questions?
No questions.
Okay, does anyone in the public like to comment? No. Okay, this looks like it's an action item.
Yeah,
I'll
just-
move.
I-
Oh, go ahead.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'll move approval on the item that we adopt the resolution.
I'll second and thank Rick for a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
Andriotta? Aye. Broadway?
Yes.
Burris? Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to item J then, Senate Bill 125, Funding Program Allocation and Administration. Mike Costa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board and public. Mike Costa, I wanted to provide the board with an update on this item, and there will be an action for our executive director. Senate Bill 125 was a trailer budget bill, actually, that was adopted in July of 2023, so this year. And essentially, it was to address some of the major impacts to transit operators statewide due to the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on ridership and revenues to those operators. And so Senate Bill 125, or SB 125, created a large influx of one-time funding programmed through two funding sources that are identified: the Transit Intercity Rail and Capital Improvement Program, or TIRCIP, which is an existing program, and then a brand new program, the Zero Emission Transit Capital Program, or what I call ZETSIP, which is new. And that funding is to be used by operators to address either operational needs or capital needs. In September of this year, final guidelines were released for Senate Bill 125 funding sources. And we as PCTPA, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, are the administrators of that funding for our region, which is roughly about $37.9 million that we're receiving as a one-time influx. So, as I mentioned, there are two sources of funding that Senate Bill 125 impacts. One is the TIRCIP program, which is an existing program that has traditionally been a competitive program statewide, and it has been used to fund large-scale transit or rail projects and capital projects. And now with Senate Bill 125, this program and the funding associated with our region is available for operational funds should our operators need them. The ZETSIP program, which is brand new, is actually intended to fund a lot of zero-emission conversion projects for our operators that either have to buy or purchase battery electric buses or that have to convert their charging facilities to include electric charging capacity for their buses at their courtyards or en-route charging. So some of the requirements for 125, it is a very fast-moving program. Again, it was just adopted this year. The guidelines came out a couple months later, and we have to submit as PCTPA, the RTPA administrating this funding source, an initial allocation request package by the end of this year, or December 31st of 2023. So this allocation package requires a lot of technical details that we're working through with our partners, including the budget of our operations, including all of the capital programs that are being nominated for this funding, and then all the data associated with our operators that the state wants to understand how the pandemic has impacted their services and what their intent is to make their services whole moving forward. For this program, the one saving grace, I would say, is that we are allowed to change our project list at any time during the administration of these funds. So the initial project list that's included in the staff report, which I'll go over in a minute, can change at any time at the discretion of PCTPA. And it doesn't even require our board's approval. We can do that administratively for the state. And then again, we are responsible moving forward over the next 4+ years of this funds to report to the state and provide any sort of information regarding our transit operators that the state requires as part of the conditions for these funds that we're receiving. So just to jump in, the kind of distribution of the funds, staff has worked diligently with all of your staffs to identify what eligible projects we could submit as part of our $37.8 million package. And one of the off-the-top requests, which is allowable under the funds, is a 1% administration fee, which PCTPA is claiming or proposing to claim. And then we also have identified some regional carve-out projects included on that list there, the Capital Corridor being a large project that we are working with CCJPA to help them fund their phase 1 and potentially phase 2 improvements to increasing services here into the Placer region. We are also looking at this funding to be used for projects, again, associated with the electric charging or bus purchases that our operators need, and these are regional projects including the South Placer Express or Rapid Link project, which you may have heard me refer to before, and then some electric charging facilities at key transfer locations throughout Placer County. And that's about $14 million off the top. Then looking at the remainder of that $37.8 million funds, we did work with our operators to kind of break it down into our local communities and identify projects, again, that are eligible for this funding that would benefit all of our local communities. In Auburn, we have some van purchases as well as some charging facilities to support the Auburn Transit Services with a $1 million floor associated with that funding, so they get at least $1 million. With Placer County Transit, we're looking at about $13.1 million to be spread out through capital projects that benefit services throughout all the communities that Placer County serves, including Lincoln, Rockland, Loomis, and the unincorporated areas. Those projects are all capital-based projects, whether they're purchases of vehicles or infrastructure to support the charging of those facilities. And then lastly, Roseville Transit is looking at about $8.7 million associated with some bus replacement projects, as well as improvements to some of their shelters. One of the things that I'd like to note, as you saw on the previous slides, is that this funding right now, given its kind of, I would say, constraints, and given that our operators, in working with them, have not identified an operational need for the funds, what we're proposing before you today is a programming of all these funds towards capital projects, which again is really the intent of TIRSIP. And with ZETSIP, of course, we do have infrastructure needs for zero emission conversion. So this list is all capital based. There are no operating funds that we're proposing at this time. That's not to say that in the future, if for some reasons we have cost savings with these capital projects, or if we determine an operational need in the future and we need to swap out a project, we can still do that. These funds are available for operations. And one of the other things to note is, as we're working through the comprehensive operational analysis and short-range transit planning efforts, there may be some projects that come out of that this funding could be used for. And again, this is a one-time funding source, so we can change things as we move forward. So with that, staff is recommending not necessarily an adoption of this project list, but it is recommending that the board authorize our executive director to submit the initial allocation request based on the information presented today, and to authorize the executive director to make any necessary program changes or amendments thereof to all of these projects as the program unfolds over the next 4 years. This was reviewed also by our Transit Operators Working Group and our Technical Advisory Committee, and they all concurred with our proposed project recommendations for the initial project list. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Board members?
Just a quick question, Mike, the projects themselves, you mentioned that's not something that necessarily would come back to the board if you were to change this list. The flexibility exists for staff to make those changes, but is there a plan that if this does change, we will be updated so that we don't have a list I'm looking at today and then a year from now I'm looking at a completely different list and wondering why the Nevada Station electrification isn't happening? That's an example.
Absolutely. We can definitely bring this back as an annual or semi-annual report to the board just to inform them of what's being developed or if there's any changes that are necessary.
Great.
We're happy to do that.
And then I had a question as well. So you mentioned that we are able to fund infrastructure for zero emission fleet. Is that specifically limited to charging? Because I see that this proposal is centered around electric vehicle charging, whereas fuel cell vehicles are kind of generally being left out of the mix. Or is there any eligibility for consideration of that type of infrastructure?
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't, the program does not require a specific type of charging infrastructure. In this particular case, we've identified projects that are needed right now, but it doesn't mean that in the future we can't fund alternative charging sources.
So I have really strong concerns about the future of grid capacity. I'm just going to leave that at that. I would say it would be very wise for us to have a diversified portfolio. Right now, there's a hydrogen fueling station in Citrus Heights, and there's one in Truckee, but the entire I-80 corridor between there, good luck. I think we should really consider putting something along the I-80 corridor, potentially along the 65 corridor, just to make sure that we're future-proofing. Like you said, this is one-time funding that doesn't come around often, and I think that's an area where we have a gap that we need to fill.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments.
Susan, can I follow up on that? Yeah, so that's a fantastic point, and it's something I've been hearing more and more about is the projects on the charge locations not being specifically 100%, that there is a mix so that not only do you have other alternatives, such as the hydrogen solution incorporated, but as things change, which I suspect, like you do, that they are going to change based on keeping up with what's happening in the development of both the electric vehicles and the other alternatives. Is that something we are looking at as we move these projects forward, is ensuring that we have at least, even if it was an 80-20 or a 90-10, but that you have the ability to make modifications as technology changes as well?
As an agency, I think that is something we are looking at when we're looking at our infrastructure along 80 and 65. There are some projects that we are planning, and I can let Matt maybe speak to that, or David. But in terms of this program, I want to make it very clear that the TIRSIP or the SB 125 guidelines are intended for transit operators. And we are looking at projects that could benefit both operators and maybe the public. However, with that being said, the program as it's laid out right now is very specific on identifying needs now that we know of now. And so the funding has to go with all the requirements that they're asking us. It has to be kind of defined projects that we need right away that are ready to kind of almost, I would say, deliver in the next 4 years. And that's why you see the projects that you see now. Doesn't mean, again, that that list can't change as we identify needs, but we haven't quite identified or flushed out the alternative charging needs outside of battery electric that our operators need now, if that makes sense. So we can update this list at any time in the future as we develop our plans, but right now we have to submit something that's ready to go now, and that can be flushed out now without saying that, oh, we want to get to this later, but we don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah, and so kind of circling back to our current fleet electrification that we're in the process of trying to adopt, I would say that it's very prudent that our board diversify that fleet adoption and really consider having the alternative fuel, because I would say for one, fleet charging station, you could be looking at multiple megawatts of capacity requirement. And I will tell you that the work it entails to bring 5 megawatts online is not fun. I'm going to put it that way. It's a very grueling, years-long process that is going to put us behind the curve, where we potentially have opportunity now to bridge that gap and not be sitting behind a number of other projects that may take a very lengthy period of time to find out they're never coming online. Not to be all doom and gloom, but I would just say that it would be very prudent of our board to be advanced in our thinking and maybe make some early adoptions to set ourselves up for success.
If I could, through the chair. And I would say to Director Burris and Vice Chair Broadway, spot on. Staff fully agrees with you and has already been internally talking about this. And when we think about sustainability into the future, what does that mean, right? And, if, not to go too far afield here, but if you look at IBM and one of these companies that is a 100-year-old company, the reason it's a 100-year-old company is because it never got in bed with one technology, right? It was technologically agnostic. And so what we want to do is we want to future-proof the county and our mobility. And Mike's already articulated it perfectly. Right in front of us, this money right in front of us is around electrification and those transit operations. And we want to make sure we keep all of what's ours and spend that with our transit operators and others. We do have other ongoing work around sustainability into the future, work that staff is looking at, grants that we'll be applying for next year as well. And so, yeah, we as staff and as subject matter experts, like you very well are in the electrical area, think that it's going to take more than just electrification. It's going to take everything, especially when you look at medium and heavy duty vehicles. If you just look at where we sit geographically, next to those hills and mountains over there. So a long-winded way to say we totally hear you, and we are thinking the same thing as far as making sure we have a blended future that just isn't something besides combustion engines. Yeah.
Madam Chair, a couple of questions. The Capital Corridor, 10 million, is that phase 1, phase 2, yet to be determined?
Yeah, the Capital Corridor funding is in conversations with their executive director and senior leadership. There are some cost issues that they're sort of getting ahead of. They have asked would we consider part of that 37? Would we put a carve out regionally to them? We all collectively came around the number of 10 million.
Great.
That can be used for 2 if it is not used. Director, it can get moved into the next phase.
Yep, great, thank you. I'm glad to hear there's flexibility. The Roseville Galleria charging infrastructure, assume that's the overhead stuff that we've already, okay. And then the last question is the en route charging infrastructure in Lincoln, Loomis, and Rockland. Those are for lack of a better term, the Tesla or, charging stations?
So it's actually for the
Supercharger.
transit operations in those respective communities. So it's not necessarily public charging, it's for to support en-route charging for the electric buses that will eventually run through those communities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions by board members? Anyone from the public? Okay, this is an action item.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay.
Andriata. Aye. Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez. Aye. Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, very well. Moving on to item K, South Placer, South Sutter Fair Share Transportation Funding Analysis Project Update. Mr. Melko.
Good morning, members of the board. David Melko. I will be introducing this item, and then I will be turning it over to our consultant with DKS Associates. So, go through. So we have 7 points here that we would like to talk to you about with respect to the South Placer, South Sutter Fair Share Analysis. The last time that we were before the board on this item was in January of 2023, when we brought an amended memorandum of understanding between Roseville, Sutter County, Placer County, and PCTPA, as well as funding reimbursement agreements, and the authorization by the board here to hire DKS Associates to conduct the analysis. So it's been a year, and we thought this would be a good opportunity to bring you up to speed in terms of where we're at and where we still need to go. So we will be talking about, I'll provide a brief background on the project. We'll talk a little bit about the scope of work activities, the model development that we needed to update the Sparta model, the land use assumptions that go into this analysis, and the deficiency analysis in terms of identifying improvements that are needed, which eventually will result into a funding program. Discuss trip patterns, and then, of course, how we go about the fair share calculations with respect to various developments, and then the next steps. So project background and scope. Okay, so back in June 2009, Placer and Sutter counties entered into a mutual settlement agreement. Members of the Board of Supervisors may recall that particular action. And they agreed to establish a program of fair share mitigation for a specific plan out of jurisdiction traffic impacts. And this focused on the Sutter Point and the Placer Vineyards projects. In October of 2021, the parties, Placer County, Sutter County, City of Roseville, and PCTPA entered into a memorandum of understanding. And that grew out of a project study report that we had worked on the previous year that I had managed for Riego Baseline road improvements. And out of that, there was identification of the need. We need to continue to work together and to address the larger scope of need with respect to this particular area. And the mutual settlement agreement provided sort of the vehicle in terms of moving forward with that analysis. And so the board here, approved that memorandum of understanding, and that MOU had 3 tasks. And the first task was to conduct a preliminary flat fee analysis, which we did internally as staff, and that was completed. And that basically identified that there was a way to establish a fee program for this particular area, and all the parties were comfortable, with the scope of work. And out of that, we then came back to this board here to basically authorize a contract with DKS Associates to conduct the fair share analysis, which is currently underway and which is what we're going to be talking about in this presentation. The last task identified in the MOU, and we have not yet initiated, is an institutional framework. Because once you go through and you identify fair share impacts, fair share costs, a fair share funding program, then there needs to be a mechanism in terms of how you put that in place. And because we have Placer and Roseville, which are members of this board, but Sutter County, which is not a member of this board. So that whole institutional framework will need to be worked out, and that's a task yet to be completed. And just to remind you all, as well as the audience, the purpose of a fair share funding analysis is to ensure that future development contributes their fair share towards the cost of infrastructure, to mitigate, cumulative regional impacts. With that, this is our study area. It's a fairly large study area, and the various colors refer to various specific plan areas within Placer County as well as Sutter County. The area that's hatched, cross-hatched, is the specific focus of the South Placer, South Sutter fair share analysis. And with that, I would like to introduce Erin Vaca. She's the project manager with DKS Associates, and she will take the presentation forward. And we also do have with her today Jim Dankowicz, who is the managing director of DKS Sacramento office, who can also respond to any technical questions.
Thank you, David, and good morning to the board. So what I'm going to present today is a very high-level summary of the technical work that we've been undertaking over the past 9 months or so, and talk about the development of the key inputs to the fee calculations. So it's a lot of detail, but at a very high level. First of all, the study scope is fairly typical for transportation impact fee nexus study. And I won't go into all the details here, but just to say that at this point, we've gotten through a fair share of the technical work and are currently engaged in the actual fee calculations. I did also want to point out we've had stakeholder involvement throughout the process with the strategy team, and so we've been keeping them up to date on our work periodically. And of course, our scope will culminate with the preparation of the Nexus study, after which we'll be available for assistance on an on-call basis. So just to refresh you on the project list that we're hoping to fund with this interjurisdictional fee program, there are 9 projects that either expand or extend existing facilities, as well as the construction of some new roadway facilities. The most prominent of those being, of course, Placer Parkway between State Routes 99 and 65, and then Riego and Baseline Roads. So first, I want to say a few words about the model development, the travel demand model, because that is the key analytical tool that we use to determine the traffic fair share calculations. Key points here are it is consistent with other regional travel demand models that have been adopted in this area, and that would include the SACSIM model maintained by SACOG, and that represents traffic external to the study area, as well as the SPARTA model. So our key tasks here were really expanding the model to make it sensitive to land use in the South Sutter County area, Sutter Point specific plan area, to be specific. Also like to mention that we did run through a validation exercise to make sure that the expanded model performed as well as the model that we were given. So future land use assumptions are, of course, fundamental to the fee calculations, and we did develop 2 different land use scenarios or forecasts for this project. The first of which we're calling the primary or 2040 land use, and that most closely parallels the inputs used for the SPARTA fee program. And for example, it includes a 2040 kind of forecast horizon with, for example, Placer Vineyards Phase 1 being in place. To that, we added the Sutter Point specific plan land use. We did make some adjustments to account for the fact that the county believes due to some flooding issues, portions of that will not, develop as quickly as others. Also refined some of the residential inputs based on the project proposals that have been received so far. And then we also made some minor refinements from the participating jurisdictions. But that's the basic source of our primary or 2040 scenario. And then we also developed what we're calling a super cumulative scenario, really just so we'll have the information of, what would the fee levels be if they're spread across more or greater quantities of development. So in this case, we went ahead and included the entire Sutter Point specific plan, build out land use quantities, Placer Vineyards build out in several other areas such as the Sunset area specific plan. We also accounted for additional growth in the city of Lincoln, increasing land use quantities to match the general plan 2050, and then Curry Creek as well. Totals were adjusted to match a study that was done in 2017. So that's our super cumulative scenario. And all of this has been reviewed in pretty great detail by the project development team. So this slide just summarizes the resulting jobs and housing ratios, total jobs per household for the model study area. And we look at this because we know this is an area of concern for some stakeholders. I will mention that the jobs are really estimated because the travel demand model actually takes square footage of non-residential land use as the input. So we did use some assumed employment densities to come up with these jobs. And the key point here is that this is based on locally adopted and approved land use plans, so general plans and specific plans. Moving on, I wanted to say a few words about the deficiency analysis because this is, a statutory requirement for impact fees. And we do this for a couple of reasons. First of all, to identify whether there is an existing deficiency, in which case that will affect the proportion of the project cost that can be allocated to the fee program. And we also need to demonstrate the need for the projects related to planned growth and land use. So we look for future deficiencies if the projects are not implemented. And we actually did two different deficiency scenarios, one of which uses future land use but removes all transportation network improvements within the study area. And that would be the baseline scenario. And then we did a background deficiency analysis that removes only the projects that will be funded by this proposed fee program. In terms of the metrics and methodology, we adopted an approach that's parallel with the Sparta fee program, so that's familiar to the PDT. And I'll show you a couple of plots. So this represents the existing 2019 scenario. And it may be a little hard to read there, but we do have some existing deficiencies on Baseline Road. And then for the 2040 baseline deficiency scenario, you can see a lot of red on the map, which is actually a good thing for our purposes because it does support the need for these proposed projects, both on existing facilities such as Riego Baseline Road and on existing facilities that are parallel to new roadways that are proposed to be built, such as Placer Parkway and Santucci Boulevard.
Madam Chair, before, can we go back to the 2019 slide?
Sure.
So is the orange baseline, does that represent the eastbound deficiency, or see, you have two baseline roads, and so what does the orange represent?
So the orange is level of service E, and red is level of service F, and what we're using is level of service D as the performance threshold.
Okay, so the difference in color does not represent a direction.
In that case, it does. This is a PM peak hour that we're looking at.
Headed in the east direction.
Eastbound, I believe so, yes.
Okay, and then my curiosity is, above all that, what is that spidery thing? What is that?
Yeah, so that's an abstraction of the network in the model. That's an area that has not been developed yet, and we also do not have any proposed future roadways. So those are just placeholder for transportation analysis zones. And I probably should have turned off all the centroid connectors in this plot.
Thank you, Madam
It's
Chair.
not a real road.
All right, good.
Great question. So I was asked to say a few things about trip patterns, which is kind of challenging to do in a slide or two. So what I thought I would show you is some traces of daily traffic from different geographic areas. And this illustrates the model's capability to track the origin and destination of all traffic that passes through each project segment. And so the different colors represent different potential fee districts. For example, Sutter Point is shown in the pink bandwidths, and Roseville West is in green. Dry Creek area is in orange, and so forth. And I show this just to point out that we've been reviewing these patterns. This capability has been very useful in refining the fair share calculations. We've gone through several iterations of that, just to make sure that traffic patterns make sense and are kind of as expected. Now we'll get into a little bit of detail on the actual fair share calculations. And this slide talks about the percent of project costs that can be attributed to new development and therefore the fee program. This is kind of related to the analysis we did for the deficiency analysis. And on the chart where the blue portion of the bar represents traffic associated with existing development, you can see 3 different scenarios. Scenario A, there's no future deficiency, therefore we cannot charge anything to the fee program. Scenario B, where the volume above the capacity of the roadway is 100% associated with new growth, then 100% can be charged to the fee program. Scenario C, where you see that traffic associated with existing development is contributing to the overcapacity condition, or we can only charge that portion, the area Y over X, to the fee program. So just wanted to point that out. As far as the fair share calculation steps, this gives a fair amount of detail about the technical steps that are taken. And I'll just say here that the end result is, we're tracking the traffic that passes through each segment of the project as far as the actual traffic analysis zone. And so this allows us to very precisely calculate the shares of growth traffic associated with each area. And this slide provides an example of how total project costs get translated down into the numbers that go into the fee calculation. So, for a hypothetical $1 million project, say we discover 50% of the traffic using that project is actually associated with through traffic or existing development. So that's 50% off the top right there. And then of that remaining 50%, it's apportioned to different geographic districts according to their share of the growth traffic. So we are preparing 4 different fee and fair share calculation scenarios. The first 2 scenarios are done with the 2040 land use forecast, and scenarios 3 and 4 will use the supercumulative land use quantities. And then within each of those land use options, we have 2 roadway network improvement options, one with and one without Placer Parkway. There is also a variation in the Riego baseline road cross-section between the 2040 and the supercumulative scenarios. So 6 lanes for the supercumulative. I will also point out that even the scenarios that do not include the entire Placer Parkway, we are assuming the Phase 1 portion is constructed since that funding has already been programmed. And that's the easternmost Placer Parkway segment. Cost estimates for the projects themselves are, of course, another key driver of the eventual fee schedule. And we have pulled these from a variety of sources. You'll also see here that we've broken up some of the projects into different segments, such as Baseline Rago Road, and that allows us to more precisely associate the cost of that particular segment with the different sources of traffic on each segment. And so some of the estimates have come from cost estimation work that has been previously done for the SPARTA program or otherwise, such as the Rago Baseline Project Study Report. In other cases, our teaming partner, Kimley Horn, has prepared planning level cost estimates, such as for the State Route 99 improvements. And everything has been inflated to $2023 where necessary. So you'll see the total cost. It's a very ambitious program of improvements we're considering here. But that is not the total that is going into the fee calculations, of course, because it's going to depend on the deficiency analysis and the fair share calculations. We do have two sets of cost estimates because, as I mentioned, the Rago Baseline Road cross-section will vary depending on the land use scenario. The reason some of these segments I have in the box there is we're still refining those. We did get some updated cost estimates from Placer County, and we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples between the two scenarios and including all the same cost estimate elements. So we're still refining those particular segment costs, but otherwise have all the costs needed to do the fee calculations. So I will conclude with talking about some of the next steps now that we've gotten a lot of the heavy lifting out of the way. So this month, we hope to have the preliminary fee schedules developed. In parallel, we've also started talking with the PDT about administration and implementation options. So that's going to continue through January of next year. We'll come back to you in February with a workshop presentation. And at that time, you can see the actual proposed fee schedules and options. And we hope to wrap up our work by March 2024 and prepare the final report. And at that point, the work will switch to the MOU Task 3 in determining the institutional framework for administering the fee. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Board members, questions, comments?
None for me.
Do we have anyone from the public that would like to comment?
Actually, I do.
Yes.
Sorry, also.
Mr. Hausch.
Have you done this presentation in Sutter County?
No, we have not, but we are talking with them about getting that scheduled.
Okay, thank
you. No one from the public? Okay, this was just informational. I would like to thank you both. Thank you for that presentation, and thank you, David.
Thank you. And as indicated here, we'll be back before the board in the spring. And then, of course, once the final Nexus report is completed, it's not something that we want to have just sit on the shelf. So then the next item that we will bring back to the board will be to talk about how we implement the institutional framework. And that, of course, will be another process in and of itself.
Okay. Trinity, do you have any comments? No. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to item L, our federal advocacy update. Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll go from the hyper-local to over to Washington, D.C. for our federal advocacy update. And I see Mike Miller with TFG coming on camera. He's going to present this, but just as a quick intro from Mike, as you'll recall, TFG is our new federal advocate. We selected them in January of this year, January or February. You all have had an opportunity to meet him in DC once. And Mike and I have worked on a federal advocacy plan for the agency, and I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about that. But we are all absolutely thrilled to have TFG and Mike as part of our team and our federal advocacy. So Mike, I'll throw it to you and be available for questions as well. Mike?
Thank you, Matt, and good morning, board members. Just want to check you all can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Again, Mike Miller, I'm a partner at the Ferguson Group, and it's my pleasure to work with PCTPA as we continue to move forward with what I think is a really well-planned federal agenda. We truly appreciate the opportunity to work on your behalf. There's a lot of exciting things going on in Placer County on the transportation front, and we're really pleased to be able to be a part of your team to help secure success at the federal level. I'm pleased to be able to join you today just to give you a brief update on PCTPA's federal agenda development, what we've done in brief over the past several months. Also give you an update on what's happening in Congress and in the administration that's relevant to PCTPA and transportation generally. And take a quick look at where we see things heading over the next few months and maybe even the next couple of years as the bipartisan infrastructure law starts to be closed out. That happens in September of 2026. And what we can expect moving forward on transportation authorization and opportunities that might be presented for our projects. But I'm going to take things a little bit reverse order. This has been kind of an interesting morning, transportation news-wise. And there are three things I wanted to make you aware of. First, not the best kept secret is former Speaker McCarthy announced this morning via Wall Street Journal that he's resigning at the end of this year. The interesting thing about that is that when he leaves office in December, his seat is vacant, possibly for up to even 5 months, depending on how the special election process might proceed. There have also been a couple of other changes in the House Republican delegation, which is currently in the majority. There's a New York special election to fill the seat vacated by expelled member George Santos. That's likely to happen in February. The thinking on that is that that seat, which was held by Republicans, might move over to Democrats. That seat was that district was taken by President Biden in the presidential election. So there's some leaning that way. There are also two additional departures in early 2024. Different members have announced that they're going to resign for various reasons. So what's interesting is that for this next session of Congress is likely to leave a majority in the neighborhood of 219 to 213, and they need 217 votes. So the majority, which has been 4, is now down to 2. And it'll be very interesting to see what impact that shrinking majority might have on Congress's ability to move forward with appropriations bills, the budget, specifically the transportation bill, but basically all areas that are funded by Congress. It's just going to be an interesting year in 2024 in that regard. Also, this morning, and you may all have heard this, but high-speed rail was announced today that 2 projects receiving over $6 billion of funding going to be funded through bipartisan infrastructure law funding for intercity rail projects. The 2 lines are the Central Valley section of California high-speed rail, and then also the connector from Las Vegas into Southern California. Interesting to see the details on that when those come out. There's at least as of 30 minutes ago, there had not been an official release from DOT on the particulars of the funding, the timing, but we'll be looking at that, and clearly that has some potentially significant direct and indirect impacts in Northern California moving forward. One thing that struck me was $6 billion is a lot of money. And so we'll be interested to see where that comes from, how that's going to be paid for, and how that impacts, other transportation funding at the federal level moving forward, as well as probably the state, now that I think of it. The other sort of third item is you may all be aware that the federal government is currently being funded under a continuing resolution that expires in 2 tranches. The tranche that we're interested in expires in mid-January. It's January 19th. That's the due date for the Transportation Appropriations Bill. There's at least one large earmark in that bill for a project in Placer County. That's the Blue Oaks Widening Project in Roseville. We're watching that closely. The news this morning is that the House Speaker, Mr. Johnson, sent his top line numbers for the budget bills over to the Senate for consideration. And that's not something they just do. That's, those numbers have probably been negotiated and, between the House and the Senate. So that's potentially a sign of progress on appropriations. And again, what that means is we might be able to hit that January 19th date for passage of the Transportation Appropriations Bill, which will then mean that the earmarks included in that bill, including funding for Placer County, will be enacted by the president and will become available through federal highways. So we're keeping a close eye on that, but that's good news from a budget perspective this morning. Now, just briefly, I'll outline our work with your team on developing and moving forward on PCTPA's federal agenda. Matt mentioned that I've had a chance to meet most or all of you in DC, and it's been a real pleasure talking with you and getting to know more about your priorities. And we also had an opportunity this fall during the Placer Business Alliance meeting in DC to talk further. Also during those meetings when we've talked about priorities, we've also had an opportunity to talk about the importance of working together, particularly at the federal level, how important that is both in Congress and within the administration to show good, strong regional support for project requests. And you folks are clearly organized, and you're very supportive of your priorities, and that is it's not as common as you would think. So congratulations on being a good functioning body in that regard and working for each other. That's terrific. Success in DC also requires active participation of elected officials and your staff. And again, you folks have been great about that. The board has been engaged in DC, working on your priorities, talking with decision makers. Matt has been excellent this year, well organized. Board members, you clearly have strong working relationships with your congressional delegation, and Matt and his team have been representing PCTPA exceptionally well. You all are building strong relationships with the decision makers through both your subject matter knowledge, and then you all have engaging styles, which is also important in these meetings that we do with agency folks and your congressional offices. We've been working with Matt and his team to outline funding opportunities at the federal level and matching those up to your priority projects. We've been developing the project information we will need to actively seek federal action, both competitive grants as well as appropriations requests or congressional earmarks. And part of the process is building relationships with your congressional delegation and key officials at USDOT who have direct and indirect control over the decision making as to whether you get your funding that you've requested. And that's got to be an ongoing effort. And you can't just submit an application and have great hopes for success. You need to engage before, during, and after the decision-making process so that you are aware of priorities within agencies and within congressional offices so that your applications can reflect those priorities and so thereby you can improve your chances, at success. To that end, we recently met with Federal Highways. Matt and his team came in and did a great job with Federal Highways, and we've leveraged that meeting into a meeting this month, I believe it's next week, with key staff in the Office of the Secretary, who will have direct responsibility for sort of the final decision-making on some of the key grants that the PCTPA is likely to apply for this year and in coming years. So we're building that relationship within the Secretary's office, the key staffers there, and we'll have more on that meeting in our next monthly report that I provide to you folks. We'll on the Capitol Hill side, you folks have been great about continuing to develop your relationships with your congressional delegation. That's important in at least two areas. One, we rely on their support for our grant applications, the competitive grant applications that are submitted to USDOT primarily. Also, you folks are well aware that Congress is engaging in earmarking budget funding. Again, we're moving into our, I believe, fourth cycle of earmarking since Congress did away with the earmark moratorium back in FY 2022. And, building that relationship with the congressional office, making sure you understand what their priorities are, and giving them projects that they can successfully carry forward to the House and Senate appropriations committees is key. And I think we're in really good shape as far as having plenty of good projects that your congressional delegation can consider when they move into that next round of earmarking, which is likely to start to pick up in late January or early February. We do need to close out this FY24 process before they can really engage in FY25. But notwithstanding that, Matt and his team are working to develop the project information that we'll need in order to make successful submittals to congressional offices and to support projects where PCTPA might not be the primary sponsor. That kind of, again, that regional support is key to success for those projects. So I've talked for a little while. I have a couple other things that I can hit, but what I'd like to do now is stop and see if you have any questions, comments. And again, it's a real pleasure to be here today.
Board members.
Yes.
Questions, comments?
Yes.
Mr. Abshel.
So Mike, news broke earlier today. Kevin McCarthy's stepping away. And so how California's losing its luster, right? How do we get?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
In the form of a question, Bruce, how do we ensure that California gets what it needs?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's been, writing about that. Interesting, and I think I mentioned this during my comments at the Placer Business Alliance, that, California has never been great, as a group in leveraging the number of congressional seats and the committee assignments. I don't want to say that it's been a failure. I mean, I think that there have been a ton of successes and members have gotten together on important projects. Great example of that is the Folsom Crossing Bridge. That would have never happened had there not been, very strong bipartisan efforts on the part of the members of Congress, senators, and leadership, at that time in the House to get that bridge built in a timely manner. But We've lost a Senate seat on Senate appropriations, which has been key for California, especially in water, but also in transportation. That position is not there, at least currently. I'll have to see if we might be able to come back in there. It is great that Mr. Padilla is on committees that relate to transportation authority. So that's very helpful. On the House side, we've had a speaker, either in the Democrat or a Republican from California for many years, and that's changed. And so you're right. I think what we can do is do what PCTPA has been doing, and that is give your congressional delegation good, solid projects that they can deliver, and go for competitive grants that are strong, that are ready to go, that don't have a lot of places where the economists and other folks at DOT can punch holes in them. And I'm confident that your staff can produce that level of work that's required to present very strong grant applications to US DOT. But where we might really miss that high degree of leadership is sort of this last item that I was going to discuss, and that is sort of the future of transportation authorization. I mentioned that in 2026, the bipartisan infrastructure law sunsets, and the BIL sort of took the place of transportation authorization, and rather than just authorize funding for transportation, the BIL covered many different areas of infrastructure. And it's going to be interesting to see whether the next Congress decides to produce another sort of all-encompassing infrastructure bill, or they move back to sort of the old method, which is focusing, one bill on transportation and then other bills on other forms of infrastructure. As that process moves forward, California is, at least from a seniority perspective, not in the strongest position vis-a-vis where it's been in the past. We do have California members on authorizing committees, particularly in the House. We've got several members on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, but it will be interesting to see, what happens, to California as the leadership, starts to diminish there. So, very long-winded answer to a very important question, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions, comments? Any from the public? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both. Matt, is there anything else you want to wrap up here? It was a very good presentation, Mike. Thank you so much.
Nope. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mike, thank you so much for what you do, and we'll see you in January. Enjoy your holidays.
Thank you. You too. It's a real pleasure, folks. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on then to item M. I'm going to let Mr. Click take over.
Yeah, so now it's that time of year, right?
Yes.
And so we have to go ahead and select our 2024 chair and vice chair. So we need to, the action we need is to designate the board member, and based on our rotation in our bylaws, the member representing the city of Rockland will ascend to the chairmanship, and the member from Roseville, Mayor Howdeschelt, will ascend to vice chair. But before the board goes ahead and takes action, I just want to take an opportunity to say to our current Madam Chair, Suzanne, Chair Jones, I just want to take a second and thank you. were, this was my freshman year, and you were just so great in welcoming me. And I just wanted, it personally meant a lot to me, the kindness you displayed and the way you welcomed me and all of the help you gave me as I onboarded in my position as the executive director. So I just want to thank you for your leadership in 2023 personally. And Mike, I want to thank you too. There's a lot of interaction that goes on when, your boss is the chair, and thank you for all of your responsiveness and help as well. So thank you. But with that, I think we've got to get on to the business of electing our chair for 2024.
Thank you, Matt, for those nice comments, but it wasn't just me alone. It was this entire board, I believe, that really onboarded you, and you've been great to work with, and look forward to many more years with you and all of your staff as well, because I enjoy all of you immensely, and you're very, very, very helpful.
Thank you.
With that, Madam
Okay.
Chair, I move,
So- No, go ahead.
do you
I
want,
apologize.
I mean, is there
We
anything else?
need no, we just need to make a motion now on,
I'd move the selection of Director Broadway for the chairmanship of the PCTPA board in 2020.
A second.
okay.
Andriana, yeah.
Okay, so we shall,
Do you want us to take,
do you want to,
take nominations from the floor so that this could be a fight or? Sure. Okay.
Nominations don't require a second, so we could just open the floor for nominations and we could nominate Ken and then take a vote. The Robert's rules and me,
yes, any nominations from the floor? Hearing none. All right, we have a motion and a second to elect Miss Mayor Broadway to be the chair of PCTPA this coming year.
Andriata,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Aye.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Howdeshell,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so how about a motion for our vice chair?
I'll move we
move.
appoint, oh, go ahead, Dallas.
I'll move that we elect Bruce as our vice chair.
I second.
Okay, great. Any nominations from the floor? Hearing none. Roll call.
Andriata,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Aye.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Howdeshell,
Abstain? No, aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Okay, congratulations to our new chair and vice chair. Do we need to play musical chairs today, or do we do that next month?
I think we do that next month.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before we get into, I've got a little bit of a PowerPoint to talk about sort of this end of year 2023, but I do want to give you all a quick update on Highway 49. I gave you a bit of a doom and gloom last board meeting together. I want to give you an update. We were able to creatively come up with a way to do a fund swap for that 1.7 million shortfall that we had. So the project is going to stay on track and be on track. There still is a small amount of de-scoping that's going to occur because of construction engineering estimates. But that package will go to the CTC in January. It should go through there without incident, and we should be good to go. So I just wanted to give you all a quick update so you weren't sitting there over the holidays wondering about the fate of the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure project.
I would have been wondering. That would have been something I would have been wondering. So thank you very
Yes.
much. I appreciate that. That's great news.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to go ahead and just maybe do a really quick PowerPoint for you. You know, as I said, this was my first year, and I kind of, and maybe I shouldn't, but I do, I come up with themes. And so the theme I had for 2023 as I onboarded was sort of a year of transition. And so I want to talk about that. And, you know, when I came on board, it was very important to me to work with the staff to set a culture of performance. And it's not to say that there wasn't one, but I wanted to make sure we all understood each other and sort of formalize that. And so we worked together to come up with a vision and a mission for the agency, something that didn't exist widely in the past. And that's what you see represented in that picture on that card. And this is what that card looks like in real life. And every one of my members, staff members and myself, this is right on their desk and they look at it every day. And Part of the reason for that is, when you come on into a new organization, people wonder, well, who is this person? What do they value? And so I wanted to put together those 14 core characteristics so my staff knew exactly what I did value. And I wanted to use that as a method to have a dialogue with them about what we as PCTPA should value. And so, the vision for us is to be widely regarded by our clients, and that word is used with intention, as a best-in-class organization. And I won't read it all to you, but I will let you know that those first 4 characteristics you'll note are B characteristics, because that is what we expect of all of us as staff to bring into the office every day, to embody that in our character and our person. And then we've got those other 10 characteristics. So, it began with setting up and working together around a culture of performance. We also implemented a merit-based salary increase for the first time in the agency's history, because really the goal here is to have a performance-based public sector organization. What I like to say, public sector motives with private sector methods, right? And so we want to create that sort of hybrid culture, and I'm very proud of what we've all collectively done together in 2023 to get down that road in establishing that culture at PCTPA. So, numbers matter, work matters, performance matters, as I just alluded to. So talking about 2023, what did we do? Well, collectively, we attended over 100 community meetings. Some of this, I actually, when I was sitting back reflecting on this, putting this together, I was like, wow, we got a lot done. And I have never been prouder of a staff that I have worked with than these folks right here. I've asked a lot of them in 2023, and they've delivered constantly. And so I'm just so grateful and so proud of this team. Some of the stuff we did, we broke ground on I-80 aux lanes at a tune of $49 million. Of course, we all celebrated that Chrissy grant, that $46 million, to fund the first phase of the CCJPA third track. Something we didn't talk about at these board meetings, but generated a whole lot of work for folks like Jody and Solvi and the rest of the team who sat on selections, is we rebid every programmatic on-call contract that this agency had. We rebid our general counsel, and we're so glad that Deanne is still there and won reselection with us because she's just part of the team. We have our state advocacy contract. We have a new team. We retained Mark Watts, but we added Politico to that group. Our federal advocate, Mike Miller, who you just heard from, is our new federal advocate, and we got a new communications and marketing on-call team in Kendall Flint with DKS, which you heard from a few months ago. What else did we do? Well, we won a $400,000 ATP grant for a countywide bike plan. Big shout out to Corey for all of his work on that. We worked together to look at what sort of operational redundancies we had, and we reduced our agency operational costs by $114,000 annually. We worked with SACOG collaboratively and in very good spirit to renegotiate our memorandum of understanding. The first time that had been done since 1986. That will save us $192,000 next year. And because we've also adjusted the methodology by which that will increase, it will no longer be just affixed to our LTF apportionment. It will be based on California's CPI. That savings will grow every year thereafter. Of course, through Sparta, we adjusted our fees. We increased our revenue by 80%, and we did so without any active opposition from BIA. So to Rick and everybody else, a lot of hard work there. And oh, by the way, we built that new website with all of Corey's photography on it for under $5,000. So I could sit here and talk about each one of these staff members and the 2 or 3 executive level, high level things they did. And I almost get nervous about calling anyone's name out because I really should just call out everybody's name because everybody works so hard every day for us. And then, as you've heard, we sold 299 Nevada Street, and Jody went by yesterday and picked up the check. We've got a nice paper check for $1.795 million that we're putting in the bank, or hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it's in the bank. And then, just moved in on Monday to our new office space at 2260 Douglas. So 2023, a year of transition, a lot of hard work by everybody here, and I'm just couldn't be prouder. I thought I'd give you a little bit of a slideshow because we say, hey, we moved, and I don't necessarily think that without the pictures, anybody can understand how much work that entails. And again, everybody at PCTPA worked hard on this, but I do have to especially thank Jody and Solvi for all of their work. the amount of financial transactions and closing documents and everything else and all of the extra work that we threw on Jody to get this deal done was enormous. And then all of the administrative work, just in all the vendors shut down and everything that Solvay did to manage the move, and I'll show you through pictures, was just, there was lots over the last month, lots of nights, till 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night by Jody and Solvay, and I just want to thank them. But that's that junk pile on the left, and don't worry, all record retention policies were covered, and, David worked hard with us to make sure that we didn't throw anything out we weren't supposed to throw out. But that's what 25 years of junk looks like, and all of the moving boxes. And there's a close-up. If anybody wanted a toaster oven, I'm sorry, we let it go. But we got good, useful life out of it. And here's the new space. And then when you go to, get new space, and I'll remind the board, we looked at over 60 properties online, and then we field visited more than a dozen, and finally wound up at this space because the timing was right, the size was right, and most importantly to me, the price was right. But this is the new lobby, and this is what the tenant improvements looked like, what they had to do, and then the back area. Here's the main hallway. And here's Manfredo and his team doing all of that construction and carpeting. We had to have them build out a kitchen. And the picture on the left is currently what's now David's office. That was when they were putting in the demising wall to separate our new space out. And then furniture shows up, right? And it's flat packed, and they've got to pack it and assemble it and build it. And Jody Solvay and I were there to oversee that and make sure everything got put into the right place at the right time. And now we're getting a little progress. Now we've got this is what that was right there. And now if you come visit us, it looks like this. We're going to get art up, and we'll get all of that done. But we've got a nice new reception area. We've got a multi-purpose conference room. We went with these flip-up tables. And, so just everybody knows we've got a conference room that seats about 20. It's Wi-Fi enabled. So if anybody has a need for some space in Roseville, come on by. We're happy to not rent out, I shouldn't say that, loan out our space. Always looking about the bottom line. And there's some of our furniture right there as well, what it looks like after it's all said and done. There's a new kitchen. And I'll tell you though, this is what this is a reminder to me, right? Because as I said at the front, 2023 was a year of, somebody new onboarding and doing a lot of pushing. And when it's the third or fourth night in a row and it's 8:30 or 9 and you look over at your senior staff member and she's got that look on your face, you ask yourself, oh gosh, have I pushed too far? Maybe I've pushed too far. And I think what Solvay's thinking is this all gonna fit? I don't know that this is all gonna fit. I think you got too little space. But then you get in and you get this. And you go, okay, maybe we push just the right amount. I don't know. But that's what we're looking like now. We don't have art on the walls yet, but we'll get there and hopefully in the next five or 6 weeks, but we are fully functional. But just a lot of gratitude from my heart for my staff. So let's talk about 2024. What are we going to do? We're not going to rest. We're not going to sit back. We're going to move onward. We're going to move upward. You already heard Mike talk about the work that he's doing. We're going to have a lot of work on our COA and our short-range transit plan to work with our transit operators to continue to work forward, to understand how can we have, multiple transit operators in our jurisdictions, but one transit system. I will tell you, at those 100 community meetings, the number one comment I get from citizens is, why don't our transit systems work better together? Why do I have to do this transfer? That's just the feedback I get. When I'm in Sun City Lincoln and I'm in Sun City Roseville, the number one question I get besides when are you going to widen 65 is, why do I have to do these transfers and why do I have to walk from there to there? And so I know Mike is actively engaged with our operators and collaborating to try to figure out how we can do a better job at that for some of our most transit-dependent people in the county. We're going to continue on our RTP. We'll begin that work that Corey won. We've got an RFP on the street now for that county active transportation planning work. Corey's also going to be working with David and others on the Roseville to Reno rail planning study with CCJPA. And of course, we'll be continuing to be out in the community to talk about our need for local transportation funding. And David is going to be leading an effort to be pursuing a carbon reduction planning grant through SACOG. And I put a number in there. I like round numbers, so hopefully it'll be about $1 million. There's a lot more that we're going to do, but that's just a little, little more. Oh, fingers crossed. Yeah. So, well, you've put it on a slide. It's real. So, but really, that's the end. And I just wanted to say thank you to the board, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Board members.
No questions.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that. It was very thorough.
A letter of silence, don't let our silence be interpreted as a lack.
Okay, let's move on to O. Does anyone have directions for the staff?
I do, actually. First, I wanted to say thank you so much. I share a lot of the same sentiments as Matt, that allowing me and everybody being so helpful and welcoming as I stepped up and became the alternate. I think going into the next year, I will be the lead board member on this. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. You guys have all been super helpful, super welcoming. I wanted to thank Matt and Rick both for the meetings that you guys were so willing to attend and assist Loomis in some understanding and some future projects. So with that, I wanted to speak about the meeting that Rick was kind enough to give up his part of his Friday for last week for a meeting that we had with Caltrans. And so currently we're working on a project that's very, very important to me. It's the Horseshoe Bar and 80 interchange. And we're just trying to address the congested corridor in that area, trying to fix the, we're not trying to increase the volume of vehicle movement, but definitely address the current issues there, the current VMT. So here's what I guess I'm asking to agendize this for next time. I'm not really, again, I'm new here, so I'm trying to make sure I do procedure correctly, but I just wanted to know if we could possibly review any available funding for this project to see what any grants, federal or otherwise. I definitely agree with Mr. Miller that one of the things that I have learned through this year, and especially in PBA, was that Placer County is very, very good about working together. And I do believe that these things that we share, right, that part of going into Loomis affects that part of Rockland, and it congests, and then it eventually will hit Auburn and Colfax. Like it's an issue right there. So we believe it's a safety issue. I believe Caltrans also sees it that way. So I'm hoping that maybe we can get that on the agenda next time to see what kind of funding, whatever that would look like. And then also, again, I'm new here, so please forgive me. But just as a matter of interest, I was just curious if we knew when the last time Loomis had a project that was completed, that would, that partnered with this, with PCTPA. We're really trying to, I for myself, I just want to know, because I don't know, I hear all these other projects, so I'm just curious. So I'm sure you probably don't have that off the top of your head, but if somebody could get back to me on that, that would be wonderful.
No, absolutely. And to the first, we can absolutely agendize that and figure out how we can work with staff to see at what are the opportunities for something at Horseshoe Bar. Rick, myself, David, we've already been talking about this internally, so we will.
Wonderful.
I would say as far as the last time a project was done sort of inside the city proper, right? It's a small place.
Wait, correction. Town of Loomis.
It is
Thank
a
you,
town,
sir. Thank you. A year in, you'd think I'd get that right.
And they're very particular about that, Matt. You have to understand.
I still have a mark on my arm to indicate how particular they are about that. But yes, I know that in talking with David that there was some work back in 13 and 14 around electrification and some SB1 stuff. He could talk to it if you wanted him to. I'd also point out that right now, we are working on the I-80 aux lanes, right? And That absolutely is benefiting Loomis, because your residents who are, traveling past 65 to points west of that are going to benefit from that every day. So, and that's the thing about PCTPA, right? I mean, we're engaged in those projects of regional significance that no one city or town would take on by themselves. And that's why sometimes when you hear a lot of really detailed conversation, like you heard from DKS about the South Sutter Fair Share, they do a lot of complex modeling in that area to understand who is impacting and who is benefiting from transportation. So, transportation is a little bit more difficult than water. Water, you plug it into your house and you use it or you don't. Electricity, you plug it into your house and you use it or you don't. Transportation is one that, there's people already using it, and then there's new folks who are going to benefit from it when you improve it. And so even if we work on things that aren't exactly in your political subdivision or geography, we can parse out and determine how much benefit Loomis is deriving from it. So I would say, I personally think Loomis is benefiting from large regional projects like the I-80 aux lanes currently under construction, even though they might not be inside of your geography. And we can absolutely talk, but just as a little feedback, more about that. And then I know we've we helped support some stuff inside of the town and got some grant funding, be it small dollars, some years back. But we can do a more thorough analysis of that and have a meeting with you. And it'd probably be good to talk with staff, and have a workshop around it as well as agendize it here.
Yeah, and to be fair, Horseshoe Bar acts as a pretty major pressure relief valve on Taylor Road, which is a pretty significant impact to all of our jurisdictions because, Auburn can probably speak to this as well. The people who live in my jurisdiction don't work in my jurisdiction. They work in South Placer County, they spend their money in South Placer County, and they are using the roads in South Placer County while we are accommodating recreation and the other aspects of life that maybe South Placer isn't able to accommodate. This project seems very important to me, so I just wanted to throw that support in there that I would love to bring this back up for discussion.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, and I just wanted to say, I agree that we do benefit from the 80 auxiliary. That's not even a point of, argument for me. I'm just saying, I don't know if you've ever been there during, 8:30 in the morning, or if you've ever been like right there at that Horseshoe Bar Road exit around that time or even later in the day. It backs up all the way to where the on-ramp is to the Walmart. And so there is no there's no alternate lane to go into. Semis are going by, your car is shaking. It is dangerous.
Yep.
And it backs up. So yes, we benefit. I'm all on board for widening 65, and I do believe that we're benefiting from the 80 auxiliary lane. But that is also a very, very important project that I feel like it would benefit everybody to come back and look at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I completely agree with what Director Burris said, right? And just as Loomis as a place will see benefit from projects that aren't inside of your boundaries, other places right next to you and near you will see benefit from an improvement at Horseshoe Bar Road. Absolutely. Yeah. Because there is a safety component there, right? And I drove by it every day for a year going to Auburn and saw the morning queue. Yeah. And so we certainly are aware of and understand what's going on there, and we can begin to look at in a more formal way how we can help you sort of achieve that.
Thank you so very much.
Mm-hmm.
But if I may, just to follow up on that, Amanda made a great point in relationship to the traffic, and specifically, it's your key points of time, both AM, PM, the backup that occurs there. The auxiliary lanes are fabulous. We're thrilled we're getting those in. Very similar to the expansion we did on 65. It moved the congestion from the Galleria exit to Blue Oaks. This is going to just simply transition that congestion and the safety issues from today, 65, where we have all that merging taking place, past Sierra College Boulevard, and now we have that safety issue and that congestion there. So certainly, I think there's a a significant need to take a look at that. And so I definitely encourage us to spend the time to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. Anyone else have recommendations? I do want to say one thing to the board. You know, since I became a supervisor, my mantra is that it's the people that make Placer County great. And so, as far as I'm concerned, it's all of you, the hardworking, cohesive staff and leadership that makes PCTPA great. And so my direction to all of you is keep up the good work, keep doing what you're doing, and keep being great. Okay, so item P, informational items there. And it looks like our next board meeting will be January 24th, 2024. And we'll have a new board chair and a new vice chair. And everybody have great holiday season if there's nothing else to come before the board. Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for your service this last.